I am Aisha, 33 years old, and exactly 14 days ago, I buried my husband Jamal. I was standing in my sister Chantel's manicured backyard for my nephew Jaden's first birthday party when she clinked her champagne glass and stopped the music. With fake tears streaming down her face, she announced to 50 guests that her son was actually my dead husband's child, and she held up a will claiming half of my $8 million estate. I did not cry or run away. I simply looked at her white husband Trent, and burst into hysterical laughter. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand your ground against toxic family members who wanted to see you break. The afternoon sun in Atlanta was sweltering, but I felt completely numb. It had been exactly 2 weeks since I watched them lower Jamal into the ground. My heart was still a raw, open wound, but my parents, Bishop Calvin and First Lady Denise, had demanded I attend this extravagant first birthday party for my nephew, Jaden. They told me it would be good for my spirit to be around family. They told me I needed to stop isolating myself in my grief. I should have known better than to trust their motives. My family did not do comfort. They did performances, and this party was a masterclass in superficiality. Chantel had transformed her sprawling suburban backyard into a circus of excess. There were towering balloon arches, a catered buffet with a private chef, and even a petting zoo for a 1-year-old who could barely walk. She was the golden child, the flawless preacher's daughter who did everything right in the eyes of our parents, while I was the rebellious one who built a financial technology company from the ground up instead of marrying a deacon. But today, I was not the successful CEO. I was just the grieving widow, standing quietly by the edge of the patio, wearing a simple black dress and clutching a glass of sparkling water. I wanted nothing more than to slip out the side gate and go back to the quiet sanctuary of the home Jamal and I had shared. Then the music abruptly stopped. The cheerful chatter of 50 guests, mostly prominent members of my parents' megachurch, faded into silence. I looked up and saw Chantel standing on the raised wooden deck overlooking the pool. She was holding a crystal champagne flute, tapping it gently with a silver spoon. Trent, her husband, stood right behind her. He was a tall white man who always wore a smug expression and boat shoes he could not afford. Today his face was flushed and he kept shifting his weight nervously from side to side. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our sweet Jaden today." Chantel began, her voice carrying a dramatic tremor that I instantly recognized. It was the same tremor she used when she wanted to manipulate our parents out of their tithe money to buy her a new car. She took a deep, shaky breath and dabbed at her perfectly made-up eyes with a tissue. This past year has been a blessing, but also a time of deep spiritual testing for our family. As you all know, we recently suffered a devastating loss. We lost Jamal. Hearing her speak his name sent a hot spike of anger straight through my chest. Chantel had never liked Jamal. She thought he was too quiet, too analytical, and completely immune to her usual charms. Jamal saw right through her, and she hated him for it. So hearing her feign heartbreak over his death was nauseating. I tightened my grip on my water glass and took a step forward, intending to ask her to keep my husband out of her performance. But she was not finished. "Grief has a way of bringing secrets into the light." Chantel continued, her voice rising so every single person in the yard could hear her. Trent reached out and placed a supportive hand on her shoulder, looking down at the ground as if he were carrying a heavy burden. "I have carried a terrible weight on my soul for almost 2 years now," she said. "I have prayed on it, and Bishop Calvin and Mother Denise have counseled me that the truth must set us free." I glanced over at my parents. My mother Denise stood perfectly straight, her face a mask of pious sorrow. My father Calvin had his hands clasped in front of him, nodding solemnly. They knew what she was going to say. They had orchestrated this. They had allowed this spectacle to happen in front of their congregation to force my hand in public. Chantel looked directly at me across the sea of guests. "I am so sorry, Aisha," she cried, letting a single perfect tear roll down her cheek. "But I cannot hide this anymore. Trent and I have been struggling with this reality, and we feel it is time to honor Jamal's memory the right way. Jaden is not Trent's biological son." A collective gasp ripped through the crowd. The church ladies in their wide-brimmed hats clutched their pearls and whispered to one another. I stood frozen, my brain struggling to process the absolute absurdity of her words. I looked at Trent expecting him to show some kind of outrage or humiliation, but he just stood there playing the part of the wounded, forgiving husband. "Hi is Jamal's son," Chantel announced, her voice ringing with manufactured agony. It happened during a moment of weakness. We were both going through a hard time and we made a terrible mistake. But Jamal loved his son. He knew the truth. The air vanished from my lungs. The sheer audacity of the lie was paralyzing. She was standing in front of 50 people, including my own parents, and claiming she had an affair with my dead husband. She was trying to rewrite the legacy of the most loyal, honorable man I had ever known, just 14 days after his funeral. The guests were staring at me now, their eyes wide with pity and morbid curiosity. I could hear their whispered judgments rushing through the humid air. But Chantel was not done. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a thick folded document. She held it up high like a preacher holding a Bible so the blinding afternoon sun caught the crisp white paper. "Jamal wanted to make things right," she declared, wiping away another tear. "He could not claim Jaden publicly because he did not want to humiliate you, Aisha. But he updated his will right before he passed. He wanted to make sure his true heir was taken care of. According to this document, Jamal left half of your $8 million estate to Jaden. He wanted his son to have the security he deserved." The silence in the yard was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. Trent finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine with a greedy, defiant glare. He thought they had me cornered. He thought that by dropping this bomb in front of my parents' congregation, I would crumble out of shame. They expected me to run away in tears, to hide from the scandal, to quietly hand over $4 million just to make the public embarrassment go away. That was how our family operated. Mother Denise and Bishop Calvin always swept dirt under the rug with cash to protect the church image. But they forgot one crucial detail. I was not a fragile church mouse who bowed to social pressure. I was a self-made financial technology executive who built algorithms designed to detect fraud. I dealt with ruthless corporate sharks every single day, and I knew a cheap hustle when I saw one. I set my glass down on a nearby patio table. The clink of the glass sounded like a gunshot in the quiet yard. I took a slow, deliberate step toward the deck. My mother stepped forward instinctively, trying to block my path, but I walked right past her, never breaking eye contact with my sister. The crowd parted for me, parting like water as I closed the distance between us. "You stole my high school prom dress," I said, my voice loud and incredibly steady, cutting through the thick Atlanta heat. "You tried to steal the spotlight when I got my college acceptance letter by pretending you were pregnant the first time. But stealing my dead husband's legacy, that is a new low even for the golden child." Chantel bristled, clutching the fake will against her chest. "I know you are hurting, Aisha, but you cannot deny his final wishes. This is a legal document. We just want what belongs to my son. You owe it to Jamal to do the right thing and honor his blood." I stopped at the base of the deck steps and looked at her. I looked at Trent, who was sweating through his expensive shirt despite the shade from the awning. I looked at the piece of paper in her trembling hand. The heavy, suffocating grief that had been drowning me for 2 weeks suddenly evaporated, replaced by a burning, brilliant clarity. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not give them the dramatic breakdown they had carefully planned for. I threw my head back and started laughing. It started as a soft chuckle and quickly escalated into full hysterical laughter. The sound echoed off the privacy fences and the brick facade of their massive house. The church gossips took a collective step back, looking at me like I had lost my mind. Mother Denise hissed my name, warning me to stop making a scene, but I could not stop. The absolute stupidity of their plan was hilarious. I wiped a tear of pure amusement from the corner of my eye and shook my head. I looked right at Trent's panicked face, and then up at my sister's confused and suddenly terrified expression. "Oh, I see," I said, smiling widely. "You really thought you had this all figured out, but you should have checked his medical records before you fired up Photoshop." I wiped a single tear of pure amusement from my cheek and pulled my phone from my black clutch. The smart television mounted above Chantel's outdoor kitchen was currently playing a slideshow of Jaden's first-year set, to some soft gospel track. It took me exactly 4 seconds to bypass their weak network password and cast my screen directly to the 70-inch display. The gospel music abruptly cut out. The slideshow vanished. In its place, a secure medical portal blazed across the screen in high definition. The church gossips craned their necks, adjusting their glasses to read the giant text. I tapped the screen, opening a certified medical document bearing the logo of Atlanta's most prestigious urology clinic. The blue and white header was unmistakable to anyone in our affluent circle. "Read it and weep," I said, projecting my voice, so it carried all the way to the back fence. That is a certified post-operative report from Dr. Eris Thorne. 3 years ago, Jamal developed a severe vascular issue. To prevent permanent damage, he required emergency surgery and a medically necessary vasectomy. A collective gasp ripped through the patio. Mother Denise clutched her chest as if she had been shot, and Bishop Calvin's jaw dropped so hard he nearly lost his composure. The polite murmurs of the congregation turned into a loud, chaotic buzz. Deacons and church elders stared at the screen, pointing and whispering. I swiped to the next page, highlighting a bold paragraph at the bottom. I read it aloud, ensuring every single guest caught the devastating details. Post-operative testing confirms 0 sperm count. The patient is completely sterile. This procedure was completed exactly 3 years and 2 months ago, which means unless Jaden had a gestation period of 24 months, he is biologically incapable of being Jamal's son. Chantel's perfectly contoured face drained of all color. The smug, victorious mask melted into pure, unadulterated panic. Her hands shook so violently, the champagne sloshed over the rim of her glass and spilled onto her expensive designer shoes. She looked down at the forged will in her hands, as if the paper had suddenly caught fire. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a pathetic stammer came out. She looked around the yard, searching for anyone to save her from the public execution she had brought upon herself. She looked at our mother, seeking a lifeline, but Mother Denise was too busy fanning herself and avoiding eye contact with the congregation. But Trent did not freeze. My white brother-in-law turned a violent shade of crimson. The veins in his thick neck bulged against his tightly buttoned collar. The illusion of the heartbroken, forgiving husband vanished instantly, replaced by raw, unhinged rage. He stomped down the deck stairs, pushing past 2 terrified guests and closing the distance between us with heavy, aggressive strides. "You lying piece of trash!" Trent screamed, his voice echoing through the quiet suburban neighborhood and silencing the murmuring crowd. "You hacked that portal. You fabricated those records because you are sick with jealousy." He was standing mere inches from me now, his breath hot and reeking of premium scotch. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I stood my ground and looked him dead in the eye, refusing to give him a single inch of power. "It takes a special kind of stupid to forge a dead man's signature," I replied smoothly, my tone conversational. "You should have checked his medical history first. But then again, you have been a special kind of stupid ever since you convinced my sister to fund your failed craft brewery with my parents' retirement money." "Shut your mouth!" Trent roared. He raised his hand, pointing a thick finger right in my face. "You are just a bitter, barren widow. You could not give Jamal a child of your own, so you are trying to destroy the only true legacy he left behind. You would rather see his own flesh and blood homeless than share a dime of your hoarded wealth." The words were meant to break me. Bitter, barren, widow. They were the exact insults Chantel had whispered behind my back during my fertility struggles years ago. Hearing them weaponized by her entitled husband in front of my entire family should have brought me to my knees. The church ladies gasped again, waiting for my tears, waiting for the strong, independent woman to finally shatter under the weight of her grief and humiliation. Instead, those cruel words gave me the final puzzle piece I needed. I looked at the furious, red-faced man towering over me, and the entire scam became crystal clear. Normal husbands who just discovered their wife had a secret baby with her brother-in-law do not defend the affair. They do not fight for the illegitimate baby's inheritance. They pack their bags, call a divorce lawyer, and demand a paternity test of their own. But Trent was fighting tooth and nail for that forged will. He was not a victim of Chantel's infidelity. I was the co-architect of this entire extortion plot. They were in this together, trying to scam a grieving widow out of $4 million to cover whatever massive financial disaster Trent had dragged them into this time. "You are defending your wife's supposed affair with my husband," I asked, my tone dangerously calm. "Why are you not throwing a fit about her cheating Trent? Because Jaden is your son, and this entire charade is just a desperate cash grab to pay off whatever debt you are drowning in. You are going to take that screen down and hand over the money," Trent snarled, completely ignoring my accusation. He stepped even closer, his chest nearly brushing my shoulder. He raised his hand higher, his posture threatening physical violence. He thought his size and his status would intimidate me into submission. He thought the African American woman standing alone at a party full of people would back down to avoid a scene. He lunged forward, reaching violently for my phone. I sidestepped his clumsy grab with absolute precision. As he stumbled past me, my private security guard stepped out from the shadows of the garden gate. The 6'5" former military contractor clamped a heavy hand onto Trent's shoulder, spinning him around and stopping him dead in his tracks. "Do not touch her," the guard stated, his voice low and dangerous. Trent froze, his bravado evaporating the second he faced actual physical consequences. He raised his hands, stepping back from my personal space, his eyes darting nervously toward the towering guard. I smoothed the fabric of my black dress and turned my attention back to the crowd. Chantel was hyperventilating on the deck, clutching the wooden railing for support while gasping for air. My parents were finally rushing forward, attempting to intervene and save face in front of their wealthy congregation members. Bishop Calvin was shouting for everyone to calm down, demanding that we handle this privately as a family. They thought the humiliation was over. They thought the worst damage had been done. They had no idea I was just getting started. I locked my phone and prepared to dismantle the rest of their pathetic illusion, because Trent and Chantel had made one more fatal miscalculation regarding my $8 million estate. My security guard kept his iron grip on Trent's shoulder, holding him completely immobile. Trent was breathing heavily, his face a map of pure panic and rage. I stepped around him, making sure the entire yard was watching me. I unlocked my phone again and swiped to the next document in my files. The massive outdoor screen flickered and the medical records were replaced by a highly detailed legal document. It was a property deed. "You see, Trent," I said, projecting my voice over the stunned whispers of the church congregation. "You and Chantel spent all this time mocking my career. You called my financial technology company a little startup project. You thought because Jamal was a successful architect that he paid for our lifestyle. But you never bothered to check the public records for the $8 million estate you just tried to steal." I pointed to the highlighted section on the screen. "The deed to that house does not have Jamal's name on it. It never did. I bought that property through my corporate blind trust 2 years before Jamal and I even got married. It is completely immune to probate court and immune to any forged wills you managed to print off the internet. Even if Jamal wanted to give Jaden half the house, he legally could not. You forged a legal document to steal an asset that my husband never even owned." The realization hit Trent like a physical blow. His knees buckled slightly, and if my guard had not been holding him, he might have collapsed onto the patio. Chantel let out a loud, pathetic sob from the deck. The gig was up. Their massive payout had just evaporated into thin air. The murmurs in the yard grew into an uproar. Deacons were shaking their heads, and the church choir director was fanning herself furiously. That was when my parents finally decided to intervene. First Lady Denise and Bishop Calvin pushed their way to the front of the crowd. I expected them to be furious with Chantel. I expected them to demand an explanation for why their eldest daughter and her white husband were trying to extort a grieving widow. But in our family, the golden child was never held accountable. In our family, the image of the church came before the truth. My mother marched right up to me, her designer heels clicking sharply against the stone pavers. Her face was contorted with a vicious kind of rage I knew all too well. She did not look at the screen. She did not look at the forged will lying on the deck. She looked directly at me. "How dare you come to your nephew's birthday party and humiliate this family?" My mother hissed, her voice trembling with fury. Before I could even respond, she raised her hand and slapped me hard across the face. The sharp crack echoed through the sudden silence of the backyard. My cheek burned instantly. My security guard lunged forward to intervene, but I held up my hand, stopping him in his tracks. I did not flinch. I did not raise my hand to touch my stinging face. I just stared into my mother's eyes, watching the ugly truth of her favoritism bear itself for everyone to see. "You are a wicked, bitter woman," my mother screamed, losing all her manufactured church elegance. "You framed your own dead husband. You fabricated those medical records just to avoid taking care of your own blood. Your sister comes to you in a moment of spiritual crisis seeking grace for her child, and you use your dirty computer tricks to shame her in front of our congregation." My father, Bishop Calvin, stood right behind her, nodding his head in solemn agreement. "Aisha, you have let greed poison your soul," he said, his deep preaching voice booming over the yard. "You have always been jealous of your sister's family. Now you are trying to destroy her marriage because God decided to call your husband home. You will ask for your sister's forgiveness, and you will make this right immediately." I looked at the two people who were supposed to protect me. I looked at the parents who had spent my entire life shielding Chantel from her own reckless choices. When she wrecked her car in high school, they blamed me for distracting her. When she failed out of her first college, they said my academic success was putting too much pressure on her mental health. And now, when she was caught red-handed committing felony fraud to steal $4 million from her widowed sister, they were perfectly willing to brand me a liar to protect her image. "I am not asking anyone for forgiveness," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm tone. "I am looking at a group of extortionists. You slapped me to save face, mother, but we both know exactly who the liar is. You just cannot stomach the fact that your perfect preacher's daughter is a fraud and her husband is a desperate criminal." I turned my back on them, feeling the collective shock of the crowd burning into my shoulders. I signaled to my security guard and we began walking toward the front gate. My mother screamed after me, telling me that I was no longer welcome in their church, that I was a disgrace to the family name, and that God would punish me for my hardened heart. Chantel was wailing loudly on the deck, playing the victim to the bitter end, while Trent remained completely silent. I did not look back. I pushed through the heavy wooden gate and stepped out into the humid Atlanta afternoon, leaving their toxic ecosystem behind. I just wanted to get into my car, drive back to my secure home, and finally mourn my husband in peace. I thought the worst of their scheme had been exposed. I thought I had neutralized the threat by proving the will was useless. I reached my luxury sedan parked along the manicured curb. My security guard opened the door for me, scanning the street for any sign of Trent following us. I slid into the leather seat and let out a long, shaky breath. The adrenaline was beginning to wear off, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. I reached into my clutch to grab my keys. Suddenly, my phone vibrated violently in my hand. Then it vibrated again and again. A loud, piercing alarm tone began blaring from the device. It was an emergency override notification from the primary banking institution that managed my financial technology firm. I unlocked the screen, my heart suddenly slamming against my ribs. The notification banner flashed across the top of my display in bright red letters. "Urgent security alert. Multiple unauthorized withdrawal attempts detected on master corporate accounts." I quickly opened my secure banking application. Someone was actively bypassing the secondary firewalls on my business accounts. It was not a request for a few $1,000s. Someone was trying to drain the entire payroll and operating fund of my company. They were trying to move over $10 million into an offshore holding account. My fingers flew across the screen, initiating an immediate manual lockdown protocol. I watched the progress bar spin, praying that my encryption held firm against whoever was trying to ruin me. My breathing grew shallow as the realization washed over me. Trent and Chantel were not acting alone. The forged will was just a distraction to get me out of my house and keep me occupied at the party. While I was busy defending my husband's honor and dealing with my mother's physical assault, someone else was tearing down the digital walls of my empire. The scam was so much bigger than a fake inheritance. They were trying to bankrupt my entire company, and they had almost succeeded. I watched the progress bar on my phone hit 100% and let out a sharp breath. The encryption locked into place, sealing my corporate accounts behind a biometric firewall that Trent and his amateur hackers could never penetrate. The $10 million was safe, but the cold reality of what had just happened left a bitter taste in my mouth. The fake will at the birthday party had never been the main event. It was a calculated diversion. They wanted me screaming and crying in the backyard over my dead husband, so I would not notice them draining my life work. I drove back to my estate in absolute silence, my mind moving 10 steps ahead, calculating every legal and digital countermeasure I needed to deploy. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my home office bathed in the blue glow of my monitors, tracing the blocked IP addresses and fortifying my servers. By sunrise, the intercom, at the heavy iron gates of my property, buzzed. My head of security stepped into my office, his face a mask of professional stone. He informed me that my parents were at the gate demanding entry. I did not tell him to turn them away. I told him to let them up to the front portico, but to keep a full detail of guards present. If they wanted to play games on my territory, they were going to do it under my rules. I stepped out the heavy mahogany front doors, just as their black luxury SUV pulled into my circular driveway. Bishop Calvin and First Lady Denise stepped out dressed impeccably in their Sunday best, despite it being a Tuesday morning. They marched up my front steps carrying the self-righteous authority they wielded over their megachurch congregation. My mother did not look apologetic. The hand she had used to slap me yesterday was clutching her designer purse tight enough to turn her knuckles white. "We are not going to stand out here like common strangers," my father barked, his booming preacher voice, attempting to establish dominance on my front porch. "Tell these armed thugs to back away and invite us inside, Aisha." "You lost your indoor privileges yesterday," I replied, keeping my voice dangerously level. "You get exactly 5 minutes on my porch before my team escorts you off the property for trespassing. State your business and leave." My mother scoffed, rolling her eyes in disgust. "You are acting like a petulant child. You embarrassed this family in front of the most prominent members of our church. Chantel is a wreck. Trent is humiliated. You made a mockery of your nephew's birthday. We are here to give you a chance to make this right before the damage to our family name becomes permanent." "Make it right?" I asked, stepping forward so she was forced to look me directly in the eye. "You mean hand over the $4 million Trent and Chantel tried to extort from me with a forged document?" My father puffed out his chest, straightening his silk tie. "You have been blessed with an abundance of wealth, Aisha. More wealth than any one woman needs. Your sister is going through a spiritual and financial crisis. Trent made a misstep in his business ventures, but family protects family. You are going to write a check to the church for $4 million today. We will route the funds to Chantel discreetly to avoid taxes and public scrutiny. Consider it a charitable donation to save your sister's marriage and protect the church from a scandal." The sheer audacity of the demand hung in the humid morning air. They were not just asking me to surrender my money. They were trying to launder it through their tax-exempt church accounts to bail out my white brother-in-law from whatever massive financial disaster he had caused. I looked at my mother, who was nodding along as if this extortion was a perfectly reasonable parental request. I let out a sharp laugh that made them both flinch. "You have lost your absolute minds," I said. "You stand on my property after slapping me across the face and demand $4 million to cover for a felony. I am not a member of your congregation. I do not buy my way into heaven, and I certainly do not fund your golden child's fraudulent lifestyle." "You owe us," my mother shrieked, losing her composed facade. "We put a roof over your head. We raised you. We prayed for your success. You think you built that technology company by yourself. It was our prayers that paved the way for you. You owe your sister grace." "Grace," I snapped back, pointing a finger at her. "Let us talk about grace. Let us talk about the $100,000 I wired you last November. The money you specifically begged for, because you claimed the church roof was collapsing and the sanctuary was going to be condemned. Do you remember that, Mother?" She opened her mouth to speak, but I did not let her. "I ran an audit on that transfer." I continued, my voice slicing through her defenses. "Not a single dime went to roofing contractors. You took the money I gave you for the church and you used it to pay off Chantel's secret credit card debt. You bailed her out so Trent would not find out she had maxed out 6 different platinum cards on luxury vacations and designer bags. You have been stealing from me to fund her fake lifestyle for years. You are not getting another dime, not a single cent." My father's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. He stepped toward me, raising a hand with a pointed finger, but my security guards immediately closed ranks, forming a solid wall of muscle between us. He stopped glaring at me over their broad shoulders. "You are a wicked, ungrateful daughter!" Calvin spat, his voice shaking with venom. "You hoard your riches while your own blood struggles. If you do not transfer those funds to the church by Friday, I will make sure everyone in Atlanta knows exactly what kind of heartless woman you are. I will strip you of your reputation. I will make sure every business partner you have in this city knows you turned your back on an innocent child and framed your dead husband to keep your money." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, tilting my head. "I am promising you," he said, his eyes narrowing into cold slits. "You either pay for your sister's peace, or you will pay with your livelihood. Choose wisely." I looked at my security chief. "Escort them to the street," I ordered. "If they resist, call the police." I turned my back on them and walked inside, letting the heavy doors slam shut behind me. I knew my father was a prideful man, but I underestimated the depths of his vindictiveness. I thought his threat was just empty posturing meant to intimidate me. I was wrong. That Sunday morning, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and working on my laptop. I had a habit of keeping the local news station playing in the background. At 9 o'clock, the broadcast switched to the live televised service of my parents' megachurch. The sanctuary was packed with thousands of worshipers. The choir was singing, and the cameras panned across the crowd, catching Trent and Chantel sitting in the very front row. Chantel was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, playing the part of the long-suffering mother. Then Bishop Calvin took the pulpit. He did not open his Bible. He gripped the edges of the wooden podium and stared directly into the main camera. "Today we must speak of the darkness that greed brings into a family." He began, his voice echoing through the massive auditorium. The congregation murmured in agreement, instantly captivated by the somber tone. He paced across the stage, building the theatrical tension. "There is a sickness in modern society. We see people blessed with overflowing wealth who hoard their treasures while their own flesh and blood weep at their gates." My stomach plummeted. He was actually doing it. "I have seen the wickedness of greed up close." Calvin preached, his voice rising into a righteous crescendo. "I have seen a widow dripping in millions turn her back on an innocent fatherless child. I have seen a woman so consumed by the love of money that she would fabricate vicious lies about the dead just to avoid sharing her hoard. She worships at the altar of technology and finance, forgetting the very people who gave her life. We must pray for the wicked widow. We must pray that God strips away her idols until she learns the meaning of grace." The congregation erupted into applause and shouts of agreement. The camera cut back to Chantel, who was now openly sobbing onto Trent's shoulder. My father had just weaponized thousands of people against me without explicitly saying my name. In the tight-knit circles of Atlanta, everyone knew exactly who the wicked widow was. My phone started ringing before the sermon even finished. It was my vice president of operations, Aisha. She said, her voice tight with panic. "We have a massive problem. 3 of our biggest local corporate clients just called. They are members of your father's church. They are pulling their software contracts effective immediately. They cited a breach of community ethics." My heart hammered against my ribs. My father had deliberately triggered a commercial boycott against my firm, using his pulpit to destroy my business reputation. He wanted to starve me out. He wanted to cripple my company so I would be forced to crawl back to him and hand over the $4 million to save my business. I hung up the phone, staring at the television screen, as my father raised his hands in a triumphant prayer. They had drawn their battle lines. They thought they could use their religious influence to terrorize me into submission. They thought the pressure would break me. But they were about to learn that you do not declare war on a woman who builds firewalls for a living. The fallout from my father's televised sermon was swift and devastating. In the affluent circles of Atlanta, a megachurch is not just a place of worship, it is a deeply entrenched economic cartel. When Bishop Calvin stood at his pulpit and painted me as a greedy corporate villain hoarding my dead husband's wealth, he sent a clear directive to his congregation: destroy her. By Monday morning, my phone was practically vibrating off my desk. My vice president of operations burst into my office with a stack of printed emails. We lost the logistics contract, she said, her voice tight with panic. The hospital network just called to suspend their data migration project, and two of our local angel investors are demanding an emergency board meeting. They all cited the same vague breach of community ethics clause in their contracts. It was a coordinated strike. My father had weaponized his spiritual authority to orchestrate a commercial boycott against my financial technology firm. He wanted to choke off my revenue stream, so I would be forced to surrender the $4 million. Trent and Chantel tried to extort from me. I did not panic. I authorized an immediate reallocation of our emergency reserve funds to stabilize the company and reassure our remaining investors. I typed in my secure clearance code and hit transfer. The screen loaded for 5 seconds before flashing a bright red error message. Transaction denied. Account restricted. I grabbed my phone and called my dedicated account manager at the corporate bank. The woman on the other end of the line sounded genuinely terrified. "I am so sorry, Aisha," she stammered. "We received a court order 45 minutes ago. Your personal and corporate accounts are under a temporary probate freeze. I demanded to know who authorized a freeze on a blind trust that predated my marriage." She read the name on the filing and my blood boiled. Deacon Wallace. Deacon Wallace was not just a devout member of my parents' church. He was a highly corrupt attorney who served on the city council. He was the exact same lawyer who helped my father quietly settle a massive lawsuit 10 years ago when the church building fund mysteriously vanished. Now my father had called in a favor. Wallace used his political connections at the county courthouse to file a bad faith emergency injunction claiming my corporate accounts contained contested marital assets belonging to my late husband. It was entirely illegal and blatantly fraudulent, but the law has loopholes for those with enough influence to exploit them. Wallace knew the freeze would not hold up in a real hearing, but he did not need it to last forever. He only needed it to last until Friday. Friday was payroll. If the accounts remained frozen, hundreds of my top-tier software engineers would not receive their paychecks. My company would collapse from the inside out. My phone rang again. It was my father. I answered, putting him on speakerphone. "Do you understand the power of grace now, Aisha?" His deep voice boomed through the speaker, dripping with fake pastoral concern. "The Lord has a way of humbling the proud. This financial drought is simply a lesson in family loyalty. You can end this suffering today. Release the $4 million to your sister, and the legal misunderstandings will disappear by this afternoon." "You are extorting me," I replied, my voice perfectly level. "You are using a corrupt deacon to commit financial terrorism because your white son-in-law owes money to people he cannot pay. Do not speak to me about Grace Calvin. I was there when you forced Mother Denise to pawn her wedding ring because you gambled away the mortgage money before you found religion. You have always been a hustler wearing a clerical collar." The line went dead. I had hit the nerve he spent 30 years trying to bury. I grabbed my coat and drove straight downtown to the glass high-rise office of my lead attorney, Ms. Covington. She was a ruthless, brilliant African-American woman who treated corporate litigation like blood sport. I paced across her office while she reviewed the emergency injunction Wallace had filed. "They used an ex parte motion," Covington explained, adjusting her designer glasses. "It means they went to a judge behind closed doors and claimed you were actively trying to hide Jamal's assets offshore. The judge granted the temporary freeze pending a full hearing. It is a textbook shakedown." "Then we break it?" I asked, slamming my hands down on her polished desk. "I have 4 days until payroll hits. If my people do not get paid, I lose my engineering team to our competitors." Covington smiled a sharp, dangerous smile. "We are not just going to break it, Aisha. We are going to make them bleed." Wallace committed perjury by filing this. He claimed your corporate blind trust was established after your marriage. We have the original time-stamped incorporation documents from Delaware, proving you built this company 2 years before you even met Jamal. I am filing a motion for severe sanctions against Wallace for professional misconduct, and we are counter-suing your parents' church for tortious interference with your business contracts. By the time I am done with Deacon Wallace, he will be disbarred and working a drive-through window. We spent the next 3 hours drafting the legal counterstrike. Covington contacted the federal banking regulators to expedite the release of my payroll funds, citing malicious judicial interference. I left her office feeling the adrenaline pumping through my veins. They thought they could back me into a corner and quietly steal my empire. They were about to find out that I did not just build security systems, I built digital war machines. I drove back to my gated estate, the sun setting over the Atlanta skyline, casting long shadows across the highway. My mind was already calculating the next phase of my retaliation. If they were willing to freeze my accounts, they were getting desperate. Desperate people made mistakes, and I just needed to figure out what Trent was actually hiding. I turned onto my private road, approaching the heavy iron gates of my property. The gates were wide open. My heart dropped. I sped up the long, winding driveway, tires screeching against the asphalt. As I rounded the final corner toward my sprawling modern house, the headlights of my car illuminated a chaotic scene on the front motor court. Two of my massive private security guards were kneeling on the concrete, violently pinning a man face down against the pavement. One guard had a knee pressed firmly between the intruder's shoulder blades, while the other was securing heavy plastic zip ties around his wrists. I slammed the car into park and stepped out, leaving the engine running. As I walked closer, the security lights above the garage flared to life, flooding the driveway with harsh, bright light. I looked down at the man groaning and struggling against the concrete. It was Trent. My golden child sister's entitled husband was pressed against the pavement with a bloody lip. He was panting, sweating profusely, and glaring up at me with absolute sheer panic in his eyes. Lying on the ground right next to his head was a heavy steel crowbar and a large dark canvas duffel bag. I stared down at the man writhing on my concrete driveway. Trent was gasping for air, his expensive polo shirt torn at the shoulder and stained with sweat. The heavy steel crowbar and the dark canvas duffel bag lying next to his head told me everything I needed to know about his intentions tonight. He did not come here to negotiate. He came to burglarize my home while his corrupt church lawyer froze my accounts. "Get him off the pavement!" I commanded, my voice echoing sharply in the night air. "Bring him to my office. Do not let him out of your grip for a single second." My two private security contractors hauled Trent to his feet with effortless precision. He thrashed against their hold, his face twisting into an ugly mask of entitlement and outrage. He dug the heels of his expensive loafers into my driveway, attempting to resist, but my guards simply dragged him forward. "You cannot do this!" Trent screamed, his voice cracking with panic and manufactured rage. "Let go of me. I am calling the police. This is assault. You are going to jail for this, Aisha. I know my rights and I know the law." I paused at the top of my front steps and looked back at him. My security team halted, waiting for my cue. "Call the police, Trent," I said, my tone dangerously calm. "Please call them right now. I would love to watch you explain to the authorities why you are trespassing on a gated estate at night with burglary tools. I am sure a judge will be absolutely thrilled to hear how a white man armed with a crowbar tried to break into the home of a black widow just 2 weeks after her husband died. You want to play the victim card tonight? Let us see how that works out for you in front of a jury." His mouth snapped shut. The threat of actual legal consequences pierced through his blind arrogance. He knew exactly how it would look, and he knew I had the security footage to prove every second of it. I turned around and walked through the heavy mahogany front doors, leaving him to be dragged inside. My home office was a fortress of glass and steel situated at the back of the estate. It was soundproof, secure, and equipped with a digital infrastructure that rivaled a federal agency. My guards forced Trent into a heavy leather chair positioned directly across from my desk. He slouched into the seat, breathing heavily, glaring at me with a mixture of hatred and cornered fear. I took my time. I walked behind my desk, smoothed the fabric of my suit, and sat down. I did not offer him water. I did not ask if he was comfortable. "Empty the bag," I ordered my head of security. The guard unzipped the canvas duffel bag and dumped its contents onto my polished desk. Out tumbled a collection of heavy-duty trash bags, a flashlight, a set of lockpicks, and a pair of thick leather gloves. There was no ambiguity here. This was a premeditated robbery. "You are a psychopath," Trent sneered, wiping a smear of blood from his split lip. "You think because you have money you are untouchable. You think you can just kidnap me and hold me hostage. You are free to walk out that door anytime you like," I replied, gesturing toward the exit. But the second you step foot off my property, I am handing this crowbar and the security footage over to the district attorney. You are sitting in that chair because you chose to sit in that chair to avoid a felony burglary charge. Now tell me what you were planning to steal tonight. I was not stealing anything. He spat, leaning forward defensively. I was retrieving Jaden's rightful property. Jamal wanted his son to have what was his. You hid the assets. You locked up the estate. I was just coming to secure valuables that rightfully belonged to my stepson, to protect his future from a greedy, heartless woman who refuses to honor her dead husband's wishes. His commitment to the lie was almost impressive. Even after the medical records, even after the property deed, he was still clinging to the fabricated story that Jaden was Jamal's child. He was trying to leverage his white privilege sitting in my house, attempting to gaslight me into believing his burglary was some sort of righteous crusade for a child. Retrieve Jaden's rightful property, I repeated, nodding slowly as if considering his words. You brought a crowbar to smash my windows and trash bags to haul away my jewelry and art, and you expect me to believe this is about a 1-year-old baby. He scoffed, crossing his arms over his chest. I do not care what you believe. Deacon Wallace already filed the paperwork in federal probate court. The house is contested. Your accounts are frozen. You are going to lose everything, Aisha. You might as well just surrender the $4 million now and save yourself the public humiliation. I stared at him for a long, silent moment. He truly did not understand who he was dealing with. He looked at me and saw his wife's little sister. He saw a grieving widow he could bully and intimidate. He had absolutely no comprehension of the technological power I wielded on a daily basis. You and Chantel have made a massive miscalculation, Trent, I said softly. You look at my financial technology firm and you think I just build mobile payment apps for banks. You think I am just a glorified software developer. I turned my chair and faced the massive wall monitor mounted behind my desk. I typed a highly classified sequence of commands into my terminal. The massive screen flickered to life, bathing the dark office in a sharp blue light. I do not just build apps, Trent. I continued, my fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. I build advanced financial surveillance systems for international banking institutions. My software detects money laundering patterns for the federal government. I track hidden digital footprints that people spend their entire lives trying to erase. And since you decided to bring a crowbar to my house, I am going to find out exactly why you are so desperate for $4 million. You cannot do that, Trent protested, his voice losing its arrogant edge. He sat up straighter, gripping the armrests of his leather chair. That is a violation of privacy. You do not have authorization to look into my finances. That is illegal. I am a grieving widow acting in defense of my estate against an active extortion plot, I replied, never taking my eyes off the monitors. I am conducting a threat assessment on a man who just tried to burglarize my home. Sue me. I bypassed the standard credit check channels entirely. Those only showed what a person wanted the public to see. I launched a proprietary algorithm that dove directly into the deep web, scraping data from crypto ledgers, offshore shell company registrations, and encrypted wire transfer histories. I fed the system Trent's full legal name, his social security number, and his business tax identification codes. The wall monitor transformed into a chaotic waterfall of scrolling code and aggregating data points. Red lines connected different banking nodes, crossing international borders and linking multiple hidden accounts. I watched Trent out of the corner of my eye. The smug entitlement had completely vanished from his face. His skin turned a sickly shade of gray, and he was staring at the wall screen as if watching his own execution. Let us see what the golden child's husband is really up to, I murmured, navigating through the digital maze. The first thing the algorithm flagged was his craft brewery. The business was not just failing, it was an absolute financial graveyard. The data showed he had completely defaulted on 2 massive commercial loans and had liquidated every single piece of heavy machinery months ago. But that was not the interesting part. The interesting part was where the liquidated funds had gone. The money did not go to creditors. It did not go to payroll. I watched the red lines on the screen trace the cash flow through a series of untraceable digital wallets, ending up in a centralized offshore account linked to a highly scrutinized server in Costa Rica. My hands hovered over the keyboard as the final aggregation protocol finished its sweep. The system compiled the raw data into a clean, comprehensive financial dossier displayed in bright white text across the massive screen. The numbers were staggering. The patterns were undeniable. This was not about bad business investments. This was not about credit card debt. And it certainly was not about securing a future for his supposed stepson. I read the summary report on the screen, and the true nature of their extortion plot hit me like a freight train. The puzzle pieces suddenly locked into place. The urgency, the desperation, the forged will, the megachurch attack, the burglary attempt tonight. They were not acting out of greed. They were acting out of pure, unadulterated terror. I slowly turned my chair back around to face Trent. He was shaking now. His eyes were wide and fixed on the damning numbers glowing on the screen above my head. The silence in the office was deafening, broken only by the low hum of my computer servers. "You do not just have bad credit, Trent," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You did not just run a brewery into the ground." He swallowed hard, refusing to meet my gaze. His arrogance had been entirely stripped away, leaving only a terrified, desperate man sitting in my office. The data on the wall screen glared down at us, revealing a terrifying truth that changed the entire motive of the forgery. I looked at the bottom line of the financial summary, tracking a relentless series of high-stakes wire transfers to an underground syndicate. "You are not trying to steal $4 million to maintain Chantel's lifestyle," I stated, leaning forward over my desk. "You are trying to steal it to save your own life. You owe $2.5 million to a violent underground sports betting syndicate," I stated, letting the massive sum echo in the quiet space of my high-tech home office. "Not a bank, not a commercial lender. You owe money to the kind of people who do not send collection letters through the mail. They send enforcers to your front door." Trent physically shrank in the heavy leather chair. The smug white savior complex he wore like a shield whenever he attended my parents' megachurch functions had completely evaporated. I pulled up the encrypted messages my software had scraped from his hidden devices. "They gave you a deadline, Trent. End of the month. That is why Chantel suddenly decided to play the weeping mother at a 1-year-old's birthday party just 2 weeks after my husband died. You two did not forge that will out of simple greed. You forged it because if you do not hand over $4 million to wash your debt, those bookies are going to show up at my parents' gated community and collect their payment in blood." He lunged forward, but my security guard pressed a heavy hand onto his shoulder, pinning him back against the leather. "Do not say a word to Chantel," he begged, his voice cracking with a pathetic whimper. "She knows about the debt, but she does not know they threatened to take it out on her and Jaden. She thinks this is just about keeping our house and saving face in front of the congregation. If she knows how much danger we are actually in, she will take the baby and run straight to Bishop Calvin." I looked down at him, feeling nothing but absolute disgust. "You married into one of the most prominent African American families in Atlanta, thinking you hit the jackpot. You played the progressive, supportive husband, while secretly draining my parents' retirement accounts to fund a brewery that was actually a front for your gambling addiction. And when the well ran dry, you and my golden child sister decided the easiest mark was the grieving widow. You thought I was too broken by Jamal's death to fight back. You thought you could use my parents' religious influence to terrorize me into signing away my empire." I pulled my smartphone from my suit pocket and opened the video recording application. I propped it up against my sleek desk monitor, framing Trent perfectly in the center of the high-definition lens. "You have exactly one way out of this house tonight without wearing police handcuffs," I told him, pressing the red record button. "You are going to look into this camera and confess to the entire extortion plot. You will state your full legal name. You will admit that you and Chantel forged Jamal's signature on that fake will. You will admit that Jamal is not Jaden's father, and you will confess to the $2.5 million syndicate debt." Trent stared at the blinking red recording light, his chest heaving under his torn polo shirt. "If I do that, I go to federal prison," he panicked, shaking his head frantically. "The church will abandon us. Bishop Calvin will have me crucified in the media to protect his own pastoral brand." "If you do not do it," I replied coldly, "I am calling the police and handing them this crowbar along with the security footage of your attempted break-in. You will be arrested for felony burglary tonight. And when you are sitting in a county holding cell unable to make bail, your bookies will know exactly where to find you. Choose right now, Trent. Prison with protective custody or the streets of Atlanta with a multi-million-dollar bounty on your head. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. I could see the gears turning in his head. He was trapped, and he knew it. But Trent had survived his entire life by manipulating the system and leaning on the protection of powerful people who wanted to avoid a scandal. He looked at the camera, then looked up at me. The sheer terror in his eyes suddenly hardened into a toxic, desperate defiance. He leaned forward and spat a thick wad of bloody saliva directly onto the toe of my designer heel. "You are too late, Aisha," he snarled, a nasty smile twisting his split lips. "You think you are so far ahead because you have some fancy software and a private security team. But you do not understand how real power works in this city. I am not confessing to anything." I wiped my shoe on the edge of the expensive Persian rug, maintaining unwavering eye contact. "Is that your final answer?" Deacon Wallace did not just file a temporary freeze. Trent sneered, his confidence returning in a rush of manic adrenaline. "While you were busy hacking my accounts this evening, Wallace took the forged will straight to a federal probate judge who owes your father a massive political favor. They bypassed the local county courts entirely. The case is locked in the federal docket as of an hour ago. Your assets are not just temporarily frozen, Aisha. They are seized, pending a federal investigation into hidden marital funds. You cannot touch a single dime of your tech money to fight us. We own you." He leaned back in this chair, crossing his arms as if he had just won a grandmaster chess match. "Go ahead and call the cops for the burglary. By tomorrow morning, my father-in-law will have his expensive church lawyers bail me out, and the media will spin this as a desperate father trying to retrieve his son's stolen inheritance from a hostile billionaire. No one is going to believe a word you say. You are going to lose your company and your reputation." I did not shout. I did not show an ounce of the fury boiling in my veins. I simply turned to my head of security. "Drag him out to the curb," I ordered, my voice dead of all emotion. "Throw him off my property. If he touches the iron gate again, break his legs." The guards did not hesitate. They hauled Trent out of the chair by his collar, dragging him backward out of my office. He kicked and shouted obscenities echoing down the long marble hallway of my estate, but I tuned out his noise. I immediately grabbed a sanitizing wipe from my desk drawer and cleaned my shoe, throwing the wipe into the trash bin. My mind was already calculating the federal probate complication. Deacon Wallace was playing a highly dangerous game of judicial roulette, and my father was clearly pulling every corrupt string he had in the Atlanta political machine to protect his golden child. I sat back down at my desk, preparing to call my bulldog attorney, Ms. Covington, to plan our federal counterstrike. We needed to file an emergency motion to quash the federal seizure before the morning banking hours commenced. But before I could unlock my phone, it started ringing in my hand. The caller identification displayed the name of the elite private investigator I had placed on retainer earlier this week. I answered immediately, putting the phone to my ear. "Ms. Washington, you need to turn on the local news network right now," the investigator said, his voice tight with urgency. "I was tracking your sister's movements after she left the birthday party yesterday. She did not go home to hide in shame. She went straight to the downtown studios of the biggest television news network in Atlanta." I grabbed my remote and switched on the massive wall monitor, changing the input from my server data to the live television feed. The evening news anchor was sitting at the broadcast desk, wearing a deeply sympathetic expression. The bold headline graphic blazing across the bottom of the screen made my blood turn to ice. "Tech billionaire abandons dead husband's secret baby, leaving toddler homeless." The camera cut to a brightly lit interview set. Chantel was sitting on a plush studio sofa holding a framed photograph of Jamal and me from our wedding day. She was wearing a modest conservative dress, completely opposite from her usual extravagant designer wardrobe. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue, looking directly into the news camera, painting herself as the ultimate victim of a greedy, heartless corporate monster. I watched my sister manipulate the television host with practiced ease. My own flesh and blood, the sister I shared a room with growing up, was sitting on live television, destroying my late husband's honorable name, just to save her gambling-addicted husband from the consequences of his own actions. And the worst part was knowing that my parents had undoubtedly sanctioned this media tour. Bishop Calvin would never allow his daughter to go on television without his direct approval and strategic guidance. They were willing to sacrifice my livelihood, my grief, and my sanity to maintain their fragile house of cards. I took a deep, steadying breath and stared at Chantel's weeping face on the screen. She wanted a public war. She was about to find out exactly why I was the apex predator of my industry. The morning news anchor leaned across the pristine glass desk, handing my sister a boutique tissue. Chantel dabbed her eyes, perfectly careful not to smudge her expensive mascara. She looked like the ultimate picture of devastating grace, wearing a modest beige dress that Mother Denise undoubtedly picked out from her church service wardrobe. The banner at the bottom of the screen was a glaring neon yellow. Atlanta Tech CEO accused of hoarding millions from late husband's secret child. I stood in my home office, my fists clenched so tightly, my manicured nails dug half-moons into my palms. The television volume was turned all the way up, filling the room with the sound of my sister's manufactured sobs. She spun a tragic tale to the camera, talking about Jamal as if he were the love of her life. She told the daytime television host that Jamal had been trapped in a loveless marriage with a woman who cared more about algorithms than human connection. Jamal just wanted a family. Chantel cried, her voice breaking with award-winning precision. My sister Aisha was too busy building her financial empire to give him a child. When we found comfort in each other, it was a mistake, but it brought us Jaden. Jamal wanted his son taken care of. He left a will. But my sister is using her billions to freeze us out. She even hired armed guards to attack my husband Trent last night when he went to beg her for mercy. I threw my coffee mug against the stone fireplace. It shattered into a dozen pieces, echoing my rage. She was completely rewriting history on live television. She was taking the fact that Trent brought a crowbar to my house to rob me and twisting it into a story of a desperate father begging for scraps. It was the exact same tactic she used when we were teenagers. When she stole my college savings to buy designer clothes, she told my parents I had given her the money because I felt guilty for being the smart one. My parents believed her then, and the city of Atlanta was believing her now. The host looked into the camera with grave concern. But Chantel, your sister, claims to have medical records proving her late husband had a vasectomy years ago. How do you respond to those shocking allegations? Chantel sat up straighter. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She reached into her modest handbag and pulled out a thick manila envelope sealed with a red security sticker. My sister is a hacker, Chantel said, looking directly into the camera lens. She builds financial software. She knows how to manipulate digital records, and she projected fake medical files at my son's birthday party to humiliate me. But you cannot hack biology. Chantel ripped open the envelope. She pulled out a stack of papers bearing the official watermark of Southern Genetics, a highly reputable DNA testing facility in downtown Atlanta. I had this test commissioned yesterday, Chantel announced, her voice ringing with righteous indignation. They matched Jaden's DNA with a sample I kept from Jamal. The results are right here. 99.9% probability. Jamal is the father of my baby. Aisha is a liar and a fraud who will stop at nothing to leave her own flesh and blood homeless. The camera zoomed in on the heavily stamped laboratory document. The host gasped, covering her mouth. The live studio audience erupted into outraged murmurs. My sister had just checkmated me on live television. She did not just counter my medical records, she completely invalidated my entire professional reputation by calling me a rogue hacker. My phone did not just ring, it exploded. The screen lit up with a barrage of notifications that made the church boycott look like child's play. This was not local deacons and church ladies pulling their small business contracts. This was Silicon Valley. My chief financial officer called first. I answered, putting him on speakerphone while I paced across my office, crunching broken ceramic under my heels. Aisha, tell me you are watching this, my CFO shouted over the line. I am watching my sister commit perjury and fraud on live television, I shot back. Call the legal team. I want a defamation lawsuit filed before she even leaves the studio. We have bigger problems than defamation, he interrupted, his voice trembling with sheer panic. The board of directors just called an emergency session. The Series C funding round we were supposed to close on Friday is evaporating. The venture capital firm in San Francisco just pulled out. They saw the broadcast. They do not care about the family drama, Aisha. They care that your sister just accused you of fabricating digital records and hacking medical portals. You are the CEO of a financial security firm. If the public thinks you manipulate encrypted data, our company is dead. Before I could even process the magnitude of the financial collapse, my phone beeped with an incoming call from our lead investor. I switched lines, my heart pounding like a jackhammer against my ribs. Aisha, the investor, said, his tone completely devoid of any previous warmth. I am watching the Atlanta morning news. What the hell is going on? It is an extortion scam, I said, keeping my voice absolutely steady, despite the chaos unraveling around me. My sister and her husband owe $2.5 million to an underground betting syndicate. They are using a forged will and a fake DNA test to rob my estate and save their own lives. I have the proof. The public does not care about your proof, the investor snapped back. The public sees a grieving black mother holding a DNA test and a ruthless corporate billionaire hoarding wealth. Our public relations department is having a meltdown. We have federal contracts pending, Aisha. We cannot have our chief executive officer associated with hacking medical records and freezing out a baby. I did not hack anything. I am the victim of a coordinated fraud, I argued, gripping the edge of my desk. I do not care, he stated brutally. You have exactly 48 hours to make this go away. If that woman is still on television peddling this story by Thursday morning, the board is invoking the morality clause in your contract. We will force you out as CEO, seize control of your technology, and distance the company from you entirely. Fix it, Aisha, or you lose everything you built. The line went dead. I stood in the quiet of my home office listening to the dial tone. They were going to strip my company away from me. My parents and my sister were not just trying to steal my house anymore. They were actively destroying the empire I built with my own two hands to feed Trent's gambling addiction. I looked up at the television screen. Chantel was hugging the daytime host, soaking in the applause of the studio audience. She thought she had won. She thought the fake DNA test was her ultimate shield. But Chantel was reckless. She had gone to a legitimate laboratory to get that piece of paper. She had to bribe someone on the inside to falsify those specific results. And when money changes hands in a corrupt transaction, there is always a digital footprint. Always. I grabbed my encrypted tablet and dialed the number for the elite private investigator I had placed on retainer. He answered on the first ring. Did you see the broadcast? I asked, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous calm. I saw it, the investigator replied. That DNA document looked official. It is official paper with a bought and paid for lie printed on it, I said, grabbing my suit jacket. Trent owes a violent syndicate millions. He is desperate enough to bribe a lab technician, but he is too stupid to cover his tracks properly. I want the name of every single technician who handled a paternity test at Southern Genetics in the last 48 hours. We are not playing defense anymore. Find the person who signed that fake document because I am going to break them. I grab my suit jacket and storm out of my home office, leaving the television blaring in the background. My company is bleeding out in real time, and my investors have given me exactly 48 hours to salvage my reputation. I do not have time to play the victim, and I certainly do not have time to wait for the slow-turning wheels of the justice system. I pull my phone from my pocket and call my private investigator Malik as I slide into the back of my waiting town car. Malik is a former federal agent who left the bureau to open his own elite intelligence firm right here in Atlanta. He does not ask unnecessary questions, and he moves much faster than the police ever could. I tell Malik to meet me at the parking structure across from Southern Genetics. As my driver navigates the heavy downtown traffic, I open my encrypted laptop. I pull up the high-resolution screenshot of the DNA test my sister brandished on morning television. At the very bottom of the page sits a digital signature, Tyrone Rollins, Senior Laboratory Technician. I run his name through my proprietary financial surveillance software. I do not need a court-ordered subpoena when I have access to the deep web data streams that monitor global banking nodes. I trace Tyrone Rollins through his public social media profiles, cross-referencing his employment history with local banking institutions. I am looking for a thread, a mistake, a sudden influx of cash that explains why a medical professional would risk federal prison for a suburban housewife. Within 20 minutes, my algorithm flags a massive anomaly. A laboratory technician making a standard base salary suddenly received a $10,000 wire transfer into a secondary credit union account yesterday morning. I trace the routing number attached to that wire transfer. It bounces through a dummy corporation in the Cayman Islands before terminating at the exact same Costa Rican server Trent used for his underground sports betting syndicate. Trent used his dirty gambling connections to funnel the bribe directly to the lab technician. The digital footprint is undeniable. I have the smoking gun, and I am going to use it to blow a hole right through my sister's pious facade. My car pulls into the gloomy subterranean parking garage beneath the Southern Genetics building. Malik is already waiting by a thick concrete pillar, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, his posture radiating quiet authority. The air down here smells of damp concrete and car exhaust. We do not have to wait long. At 5 o'clock, the clinic shift changes. Footsteps echo sharply against the concrete walls. Tyrone Rollins walks toward us, oblivious to the trap waiting for him. He is a young man wearing expensive new sneakers that completely clash with his wrinkled hospital scrubs. He is jingling a brand new set of car keys, spinning them around his finger with a careless, arrogant rhythm. He stops in front of a gleaming black luxury sedan. $10,000 makes for a very nice down payment. Malik steps out of the shadows, blocking the driver's side door. Tyrone freezes, his smile dropping instantly. He takes a step back, looking around the empty garage for building security, but we are completely alone. I step out from behind the concrete pillar, holding my glowing tablet. Tyrone Rollins. I say, my voice slicing through the heavy, damp air of the garage. You signed a fraudulent paternity test for Chantel yesterday. Tyrone puffs out his chest, trying to mask his rapidly rising panic. I have no idea what you are talking about, lady. You need to back away from my car right now, or I am calling the police. I do not stop walking until I am standing just a few feet away from him. Call them, I reply, keeping my tone deadly flat. Please call the police, Tyrone. Because I have the Federal Fraud Division on speed dial, and I would love to explain to them how a mid-level lab technician received a $10,000 offshore wire transfer 12 hours before signing a falsified medical document on national television. I turn the screen of my tablet toward him. The harsh blue light illuminates the sheer terror suddenly washing over his face. I show him the routing numbers, the timestamp of the deposit, and the undeniable connection to the Costa Rican betting syndicate. You sold your entire career for a down payment on a car, I state, stepping closer. You accepted a bribe funded by an illegal gambling ring. The man who paid you is currently drowning in $2.5 million of debt to violent bookies. Do you really think a man in that kind of trouble cares about protecting you? When the federal investigators seize his assets next week, they are going to find this wire transfer. They will throw you to the wolves to save themselves. You are just collateral damage. Tyrone drops his car keys. They hit the concrete floor with a sharp metallic clatter. He looks from the glowing tablet to Malik, who is standing silently with his arms crossed, and then back to me. The bravado is completely gone. He is shaking uncontrollably. What do you want? He whispers, his voice cracking under the weight of his own terrible choices. I want the truth, I demand, and I want it on record. Malik pulls a high-definition recording device from his jacket pocket. The red light blinks to life. I tell Tyrone to state his name, his position, and exactly what my sister paid him to do. He looks at the camera, swallowing hard, and begins to speak rapidly, desperately trying to save himself from a prison sentence. He confesses that Chantel approached him in the clinic parking lot 2 days ago. She offered him the cash to print a falsified final report matching a specific set of names. She provided the digital template and paid the bribe up front, ensuring he bypassed the standard verification protocols. So you printed a document claiming my late husband was the father, I say, making sure the camera captures every single detail of the extortion plot. You printed a 99.9% match without running the actual genetic sequence against my husband's profile. Tyrone nods vigorously, wiping a thick bead of sweat from his forehead. Yes, I printed exactly what she told me to print. She said it was just a family dispute over a massive inheritance, and no one would ever be able to verify the raw data. She said she had a swab from her baby, and a swab from her husband Trent to use as a cover if anyone asked why she was visiting the genetic testing clinic. I paused, processing his words. A swab from the baby, and a swab from Trent. My sister was incredibly careless, but she was also arrogant enough to believe her own lies would never be challenged. I look at Tyrone, my mind rapidly connecting the dots and visualizing the biological impossibility of her claim. If you did not use my husband's DNA for the test, then whose DNA did you actually test? I ask, my voice narrowing into a sharp point. You had to run a baseline sequence to generate the fake report format. Did you run the swab Chantel provided from her husband Trent? Tyrone lets out a bitter, terrified laugh. He looks down at his brand new sneakers and then back up at the camera. Lady, you do not understand, he says, shaking his head. She brought me 2 swabs, one from the baby, and one she claimed was from her husband Trent, to establish a baseline before we altered the final paperwork. She was so confident. She told me to just run the routine test and swap the names at the very end. And I prompt, feeling the sudden shift in the atmosphere of the parking garage. And I ran the real baseline, just to be sure the file would clear the initial laboratory safety protocols. Tyrone admits, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. But the system kicked back a massive error code. The baby's DNA did not match the adult male swab she brought in. I ran it twice just to be absolutely certain. I did not tell her because I just wanted the money, and I did not want to get involved in her messy, dramatic life. The concrete walls of the parking garage seem to close in around me. The air grows incredibly still. The gravity of what he just revealed hits me with the force of a physical blow. Are you telling me, I ask, pacing my words carefully, so there is no room for misunderstanding that the child does not match Trent either? Tyrone nods, staring right into the recording lens. That is exactly what I am telling you. The infant is not a biological match to the adult male sample provided. Whoever fathered that baby, it absolutely is not her husband. I stare at the terrified technician as the magnitude of his confession washes over me, completely altering the landscape of this war. My sister had just gone on live television, waving a fake paternity test to destroy my life and steal my wealth, all while hiding a deeply buried secret that was about to detonate her own marriage and her pristine church reputation. Jamal is not the father. Trent is not the father. My golden child sister, the flawless preacher's daughter, the woman who judged my entire existence, had a secret child with a complete stranger and pinned it on my dead husband to cover her tracks. I signal Malik to stop recording. We have everything we need. I look down at Tyrone, who is trembling against his luxury car. Keep your mouth shut and do not warn them, I command. If you disappear quietly, I will not hand this video to the police today. I turn on my heel and walk back to my waiting car, my mind racing with terrifying, brilliant new possibilities. I have 48 hours to save my company, but Chantel has much less time before I burn her entire fraudulent life to the ground. If Trent is not the father, I need to find out exactly whose DNA is running through my nephew's veins. I slam the door of the luxury sedan, shutting out the damp air of the parking garage, and immediately open my encrypted laptop. Malik slides into the driver's seat, keeping his eyes on the rearview mirror as we speed away from the clinic. My mind is moving faster than the tires on the asphalt, piecing together the chaotic puzzle the terrified lab technician just handed me. Chantel lied about the DNA sample entirely. The swab she provided to the lab did not belong to my dead husband, and it did not even match her own husband, Trent. A dark, terrifying realization washes over me. I need to know exactly what Trent knows before I make my next move. I bypass the standard commercial firewalls and launch a brute force digital infiltration into Trent's centralized medical history. It is highly illegal, but my company board gave me a 48-hour ultimatum to save my empire. I am not playing by the rules of polite society anymore. My software tears through the encrypted servers of Atlanta Medical Center, pulling every physical evaluation Trent has ever undergone. I scan the digital files flying across my screen, and there it is. A clinical evaluation from a fertility specialist dated 4 years ago. Trent is 100% sterile. He suffered a severe case of testicular torsion during his college fraternity days that went untreated for too long, resulting in permanent, irreversible damage. Trent knows he cannot have children. he has known for years. I sit back against the plush leather seat, the sheer magnitude of their deception taking my breath away. Trent knew he was not Jaden's biological father from the very moment Chantel announced her pregnancy. He probably thought Chantel went to an expensive anonymous sperm bank to save his fragile white ego. He agreed to the forged will and the fake DNA test because framing my dead husband was the only way to extort $4 million and pay off his violent gambling syndicate. But Chantel did not go to a sperm bank. She was far too cheap and far too arrogant to pay out of pocket for a clinical donor. She slept with someone else, and she has been playing Trent for an absolute fool. I need Jaden's actual DNA. I tell Malik, slapping the laptop shut. I need to find out exactly whose blood is running through that baby's veins. If I expose the real father, I do not just destroy Chantel's fake narrative on morning television, I destroy her entire life. Where is the child right now? Malik asks, gripping the steering wheel. Hi is at the fortress, I reply, my voice hardening into a sharp blade. Chantel is hiding out at my parents' estate in Buckhead, playing the traumatized victim for the church elders while the media tears my reputation to shreds. Drive me to the bishop's mansion. Malik hits the accelerator, weaving seamlessly through the heavy Atlanta traffic. 20 minutes later, we pull up to the towering wrought iron gates of my parents' sprawling megachurch-funded estate. 2 armed church security guards approach my window, ready to turn me away. I roll down the tinted glass and stare dead into the eyes of the lead guard. I personally pay the premium health insurance policies for your entire security firm through my corporate charitable trust. I state my tone devoid of any warmth. Open these gates right now, or I cancel your coverage by noon. The guard swallows hard, steps back, and immediately buzzes the heavy iron gates open. I do not wait for Malik to park. I step out of the moving vehicle on the circular driveway and march straight up the sweeping marble steps of the mansion. I push open the massive mahogany double doors without knocking. The grand foyer smells of expensive floral arrangements and manufactured piety. To my left, in the formal, sunken living room, my mother, First Lady Denise, is hosting a high-level prayer circle with the wealthiest gossips of her congregation. They are sitting on plush velvet sofas, sipping imported tea, and undoubtedly praying for my wicked soul. Aisha, my mother, shrieks, spilling her tea onto her matching designer saucer. She jumps to her feet, her face twisting into a mask of pure indignation. How dare you force your way into this holy house after what you did to your sister? The entire city is watching you hoard your dead husband's millions while his true son sleeps in a guest room. I do not stop walking. I stride right into the living room, the sharp click of my designer heels silencing the gasping church ladies. Do not talk to me about hoarding wealth, Denise, I snap back, refusing to use her religious title. You sit in a $10 million mansion bought and paid for by the tithes of working-class single mothers. You locked me in my bedroom during the annual church gala when I was 16 because my natural hair was not presentable enough for your wealthy white donors. You have always cared more about aesthetics than your own children. You are protecting a daughter who just committed perjury on live television to cover up a syndicate gambling debt. My mother steps forward, raising her hand as if she might try to slap me again, but she catches the dangerous glint in my eye and freezes. You are a paranoid, delusional woman, she hisses, her voice dropping to a toxic whisper. Your sister has the DNA test. The proof is on the news. You have nothing but your bitter jealousy. Leave this house before I call the police. While she is busy trying to intimidate me, my eyes scan the room. Just behind her on the massive granite kitchen island sits Chantel's designer diaper bag. Next to it, resting on a clean paper towel, is a blue silicone pacifier, clearly freshly used and discarded by my nephew. I am not here to argue with a woman who pawns her morality to the highest bidder. I reply, stepping smoothly to the side. I walk right past her stunned church friends and glide toward the kitchen island. Before my mother can even turn around to see what I am doing, I pull a silk handkerchief from my suit pocket. With one swift, precise motion, I snatch the blue pacifier off the granite counter, wrapping it securely in the silk fabric and dropping it into my clutch. I will see you in federal court, Mother, I say, turning on my heel. Tell Bishop Calvin his empire is about to burn. I walk out the front doors before she can even formulate a response, leaving the prayer circle in a state of absolute chaos. I slide back into the car and hand the silk-wrapped pacifier directly to Malik. Take this to your underground genomics contact, I order. I do not care how many privacy laws they have to break, and I do not care what it costs. I need a fully sequenced genetic profile from the saliva on that pacifier, and I need the raw data file sent to my secure server in exactly 3 hours. Malik nods, accelerating down the driveway. I have a guy who owes me a serious favor. He runs a rapid sequencing lab for private intelligence firms. We will get it done. I spend the next 3 hours locked inside my home office preparing the digital battlefield. The public relations nightmare is raging outside my walls. My company stock is taking a brutal hit in the pre-market trading, and my board of directors is breathing down my neck. They think I am a liability. They think I am going to roll over and surrender my position to save the company brand. They do not realize I am currently building a nuclear bomb. At exactly 4 o'clock, the encrypted notification pops up on my secondary monitor. Malik's contact delivered. I download the raw genetic data file extracted from the pacifier. This is not a standard paternity test, comparing two specific people. This is a blind search. I need to find out exactly who matches this child. I open a backdoor developer portal. I built into the largest commercial ancestry and genetics database in the country. It is a massive breach of terms of service, but I am fighting for my survival. I upload Jaden's raw genetic sequence into the global server and initiate a forced familial crossmatch. The algorithm begins scanning millions of registered profiles, cross-referencing genetic markers, mapping heritage lines, and hunting for a direct biological link. The progress bar inches forward painfully slow. My heart beats a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What if the father is a random stranger? What if he is not in the system? What if I am wrong? The progress bar hits 100%. The screen flashes green. A high confidence match found. I lean forward, gripping the edges of my desk as the system generates the profile of the biological father. The database pulls the public photograph attached to the matching account. I stare at the smiling face glowing on my monitor, and the air is violently sucked from my lungs. A cold, sharp shockwave reverberates through my entire body. I cover my mouth with my hand, completely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the betrayal staring back at me. It is a 99.9% paternal match. The face on the screen belongs to Julian Sparks. Julian Sparks is not a random stranger. He is the young, deeply charismatic, fiercely married youth pastor of my parents' megachurch. He is the righteous spiritual prodigy that Bishop Calvin has been personally grooming to take over the entire ministry when he retires. Pastor Julian preaches about family values, fidelity, and moral purity to thousands of teenagers every single Sunday, while his pregnant wife sits adoringly in the front row. My golden child sister, the flawless preacher's daughter, did not just have an affair. She slept with the married successor of our parents' megachurch and then tried to pin the bastard child on my dead husband to steal my fortune and save her white husband's gambling debts. A slow, dangerous smile spreads across my face. The sheer hypocrisy is intoxicating. Chantel thought the fake DNA test on morning television was her ultimate victory. She thought she backed me into a corner I could never escape. She handed me a match, but I just found the entire powder keg. I reach for my phone and dial my bulldog attorney, Ms. Covington. The line connects instantly. Tell the board of directors to back down and lift the corporate freeze. I command, my voice vibrating with absolute lethal authority. We are not settling. We are not negotiating. Call my security team and tell them to gas up the convoy. What is the play? Covington asks, matching my predatory energy. Bishop Calvin is hosting his multi-million-dollar church fundraising gala tonight. I reply, staring at the smiling face of the hypocrite youth pastor on my screen. Chantel and Trent are the guests of honor. They are going to use my dead husband's name to solicit donations from the congregation. And Covington prompts. And I am going to crash the party, I state, grabbing my blood-red designer blazer from the back of my chair. I am going to walk right into that sanctuary and burn their entire holy empire straight to the ground. I sit across from my attorney, Ms. Covington, in her glass-walled conference room, laying the explosive DNA results on the polished mahogany table. We do not have time to celebrate the fact that my sister slept with the youth pastor of our parents' megachurch. My financial technology company is still bleeding from the corporate freeze. Deacon Wallace illegally placed on my accounts, and my board of directors is preparing to strip me of my title. Covington does not waste a single second. She initiates a secure video conference call directly to the president of the commercial bank holding my corporate assets. When the bank president appears on the large screen, looking uncomfortable in his tailored suit, I do not let Covington do the talking. I lean forward, making sure my eyes lock onto his through the camera lens. You allowed a corrupt church deacon to freeze the operational payroll of a certified financial security firm. Using a fabricated ex parte motion, I state my voice, carrying the absolute authority of a woman who controls billions in data. You failed your basic fiduciary duty by not verifying the origin date of my corporate blind trust. The bank president attempts to stammer out a legal defense, claiming his compliance department was legally bound by the federal probate order. I cut him off completely. If my payroll accounts are not fully operational in exactly 10 minutes, I will publicly liquidate every single holding my company has with your institution. I will move my entire corporate portfolio to your biggest competitor by the end of the business day, and I will personally file an injunction with the Securities and Exchange Commission demanding an audit of your compliance department for facilitating financial extortion. You have 9 minutes left to unfreeze my money. The bank president visibly pales on the screen. He knows I am not bluffing. He knows the sheer volume of capital my company brings to his branch, and he knows a federal audit would expose the preferential treatment he regularly provides to Bishop Calvin's wealthy congregation members. He mutes his microphone, frantically typing on a secondary terminal. 7 minutes later, the red warning banner on my phone vanishes. A green notification replaces it, confirming my master accounts are fully restored and active. My employees will be paid. My board of directors will back down. My company is safe. Covington closes her laptop with a sharp snap. The corporate bleeding is stopped, she says, looking at me with fierce approval. But we still have a massive problem on the domestic front. Trent and Chantel still have that forged will moving through the federal probate court. Deacon Wallace pulled every corrupt string he had to get that house locked down. They are treating your $8 million estate like a guaranteed winning lottery ticket, and they are using that fake television interview to keep the public pressure entirely on you. My private investigator, Malik, steps into the conference room holding a thick encrypted tablet. He places it on the table between Covington and me. The public pressure is about to get much worse, Malik announces, tapping the screen to bring up a digital invitation. Bishop Calvin is hosting his annual multi-million-dollar church fundraising gala tonight at the Grand Atrium downtown. It is the biggest social and financial event of the year for the Atlanta elite. Politicians, real estate developers, and wealthy parishioners are all attending to donate to the church expansion fund. I look at the digital flyer glowing on the tablet. There in the center of the promotional material is a picture of my sister Chantel and her white husband Trent. They are listed as the keynote speakers for the evening. My father is not just hosting a gala, I say, the realization making my blood run cold. He is monetizing my dead husband. Malik nods grimly. Bishop Calvin has set up a specialized donation drive for tonight. They are calling it the Jaden Legacy Fund. They are telling their wealthy donors that since the wicked tech billionaire widow froze the baby out of his rightful inheritance, the church family must step up and provide for Jamal's abandoned child. Trent and Chantel are going to stand on that stage, cry about being victimized, and collect millions of dollars in tax-free church donations. The absolute depravity of their scheme is staggering. Trent owes $2.5 million to a violent underground sports betting syndicate. My parents know about his gambling debts, but instead of holding him accountable, they are leveraging their religious authority to fleece their own congregation. They are actively scamming innocent churchgoers out of millions of dollars just to pay off violent bookies and save their golden child's fraudulent marriage. I stare at the smiling faces of my sister and her husband on the gala invitation. A vivid memory from my teenage years surfaces, pushing the lingering grief out of my chest and replacing it with pure cold fury. I remember being 16 years old, forced to attend this exact same annual gala. My mother, Denise, made me stand in the back near the kitchen doors for the entire evening because she decided my natural hair and quiet demeanor were not marketable enough for her wealthy donors. Chantel was paraded around the ballroom in expensive pageant dresses, presented as the flawless prize of the family, while I was hidden away like an embarrassing secret. They spent my entire life trying to keep me in the shadows. Tonight I am going to bring the absolute blinding light of the truth directly to their front door. We are not waiting for the federal probate court to sort out the forged will, I announce, standing up from the conference table. If we wait for the justice system, my sister gets to play the weeping victim on television for months while Trent uses my father's church to launder gambling money. We are going to execute them in the court of public opinion, and we are going to do it tonight. Covington leans back in her chair, a dangerous smile spreading across her face. You want to crash the gala? I do not just want to crash it, I reply, heading toward the door. I want to completely dismantle their holy empire. Malik, get your tech team ready. I need full remote access to the audio-visual network at the Grand Atrium. I want control of every speaker, every microphone, and every projection screen in that ballroom by 8 o'clock tonight. Malik does not even blink. He simply taps his earpiece and begins issuing rapid-fire commands to his elite infiltration unit. I leave the law office and step into the back of my waiting car, instructing my driver to take me straight to my estate. I have 3 hours to prepare for the most important presentation of my entire life. When I walk into my massive walk-in closet, I bypass the muted morning colors I have been wearing for the past 2 weeks. I am done playing the fragile, grieving widow. I am done letting them use Jamal's honorable memory as a shield for their criminal extortion. I reach into the back of my closet and pull out a razor-sharp tailored designer suit. It is a stunning, unapologetic shade of blood red. It is not just an outfit, it is war paint. I apply my makeup with meticulous precision, smoothing my hair into a flawless, severe style that commands absolute authority. I slip into a pair of towering black stilettos and clasp my thick gold watch around my wrist. When I look at myself in the floor-to-ceiling mirror, I do not see the forgotten daughter they used to hide in the kitchen. I see a billionaire chief executive officer who is about to tear the roof off a sanctuary built on lies. Malik meets me in this grand foyer of my estate. Outside in the circular driveway, a convoy of 3 matte black security vehicles is idling quietly in the evening shadows. My elite protection team is already loaded and carrying encrypted communication gear and absolute loyalty to my payroll. The Grand Atrium network has been fully compromised, Malik reports, handing me a small remote trigger device. The church hired an outside production company to handle the gala media. My guys bypassed their firewall 10 minutes ago. Whenever you press that button, you have total overriding control of the entire venue broadcast system. I slip the small device into the pocket of my red blazer. I look around the quiet, empty halls of the home. I built the home. Jamal loved the home my sister tried to steal, using his death as her personal lottery ticket. Let us go, I say, walking out the heavy front doors. I slide into the back of the lead vehicle, sitting in the comfortable leather seat as the convoy pulls out of my gated estate and heads toward downtown Atlanta. The city lights blur past my window as we navigate the evening traffic. My phone buzzes with a final confirmation text from Covington, stating that she has notified certain federal authorities about Trent's offshore wire transfers. The trap is completely set. My parents think they are untouchable behind their pulpit. They think their wealthy congregation will blindly protect them from accountability. They think they can extort a widow, defame my husband, and launder syndicate gambling debts right out in the open. They are about to find out what happens when you try to bury a woman who owns the very ground you stand on. I am not just going to clear my name tonight. I am going to burn their entire fraudulent empire straight to the ground. The convoy of matte black security vehicles pulls smoothly onto the grand circular driveway of the Grand Atrium downtown. The venue is an architectural marvel of sweeping glass and polished steel, sitting right in the heart of Atlanta. Tonight, it is entirely illuminated by golden spotlights, meant to project an aura of divine wealth and prestige. Valets in crisp white uniforms freeze as my lead driver parks my vehicle directly on the edge of the red carpet. Photographers hired by my father's megachurch stop snapping pictures of local politicians and turn their lenses toward my convoy. My security detail steps out first, moving with synchronized military precision to form a protective wedge. I step out of the vehicle, and my blood-red designer stilettos hit the pavement with a sharp, authoritative click. The striking crimson color of my tailored suit stands out violently against the sea of conservative black tuxedos and muted evening gowns worn by the arriving guests. Miss Covington flanks my right side carrying a slim leather briefcase while Malik commands my left. We do not pause for the cameras. We walk straight up the red carpet toward the towering glass entrance. The head of the venue's security team steps directly into my path, holding a digital tablet and a thick earpiece. He is a broad-shouldered man who clearly takes his job seriously. He holds up a large hand, signaling me to stop. I am sorry, ma'am, but Bishop Calvin provided me with a strict restricted access list for tonight's fundraising gala. He states his tone firm, but nervous as he eyes my heavily armed detail. Your name and your photograph are at the very top of the Do Not Admit protocol. I am going to have to ask you to return to your vehicle immediately. I do not break my stride, and I certainly do not argue with hired help. I simply look at Ms. Covington. Covington steps forward, seamlessly sliding a heavy legal document from her briefcase and pressing it flat against the security director's chest. My client is not a guest on the bishop's list, Covington says, her voice slicing through the ambient noise of the arriving crowd. My client is the landlord of this entire facility. The security director looks down at the document. It is a certified commercial deed. 2 years ago, when the Grand Atrium was facing quiet bankruptcy during the economic downturn, my financial technology firm purchased the distressed commercial debt through a blind subsidiary. I literally own the ground he is standing on. If you attempt to restrict the property owner from accessing her own building, I will have you and your entire security firm arrested for criminal trespassing, and I will sue your employer into absolute oblivion. Covington finishes, flashing a deadly corporate smile. I suggest you step aside. The color drains completely from the security director's face. He looks at the legal seal on the document, looks at my unblinking expression, and immediately steps out of my path. He taps his earpiece frantically, telling his team to stand down. I walk through the glass double doors into the glittering main lobby of the Grand Atrium without breaking my stride. The lobby is dripping in extravagant megachurch wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over hundreds of elite donors holding crystal champagne flutes. Politicians, real estate developers, and wealthy parishioners are mingling, oblivious to the storm that just walked through the front doors. It takes exactly 10 seconds for my parents to spot me. First Lady Denise is wearing a shimmering gold evening gown adorned with heavy diamonds. Bishop Calvin is working the room in a custom-tailored tuxedo, shaking hands with a prominent city councilman. My mother sees my blood-red suit and drops her champagne flute onto a silver serving tray. She grabs my father's arm, her perfectly manicured fingers digging into his tuxedo jacket. They excuse themselves abruptly and storm across the marble floor, their faces twisted into masks of absolute panic and rage. "What in the world do you think you are doing?" Calvin hisses, keeping his voice dangerously low so the wealthy donors nearby do not overhear. He steps directly into my personal space, attempting to use his physical size to intimidate me. The security at the door was given explicit orders to keep you out. You have lost your mind coming here tonight, Aisha. I own this building, Calvin, I reply, keeping my voice perfectly level and loud enough for a passing waiter to hear. If you raise your voice to me again, I will call the police and have you dragged out of your own gala in handcuffs for trespassing on my property. His jaw snaps shut. The sheer shock of the revelation paralyzes him. My mother steps around him, pointing a trembling finger at my face. "You are a spiteful, vindictive woman," she whispers venomously. "Your sister is standing on that stage right now, fighting to secure a future for your dead husband's child. And you come here dressed like a demon to ruin her moment of grace. You are trying to sabotage the Jaden Legacy Fund because you cannot stand to see anyone else blessed." I laugh, a cold, sharp sound that makes her flinch. "A moment of grace," I challenge, stepping closer so she is forced to look me directly in the eyes. "We both know exactly why Chantel and Trent need the millions of dollars you are extorting from your congregation tonight. You are not building a legacy for a child. You are using my dead husband's honorable name to launder church donations and pay off a violent sports betting syndicate because your white son-in-law, owes $2.5 million to dangerous criminals. Denise Gaspes taking a physical step backward. Her eyes dart nervously around the lobby, terrified that someone might have heard the truth. You are willing to commit federal charity fraud to save her golden marriage. I continue weaponizing the past she tried to bury. Just like you drained my college tuition fund 10 years ago to pay for Chantel's lavish first wedding. The wedding that ended in a quiet annulment 6 months later because she got caught sleeping with the groom's best man. You have covered up her sickening behavior my entire life, but tonight, your little protection racket ends permanently. Calvin regains his composure, his face hardening into a look of pure pastoral wrath. I am calling the authorities right now. He threatens reaching for his phone. I do not care what papers your lawyer forged. I will have you removed for disturbing a private religious function. I smile a slow, predatory smile. I tap the discreet earpiece hidden beneath my hair. Malik, we are in position, I say clearly. Lock down the venue network. Nobody leaves. I push right past my stunned parents, my shoulder intentionally brushing aggressively against Calvin's tuxedo. Covington and my security detail follow me in a tight formation as I stride toward the massive double doors leading into the main ballroom. I push the heavy wooden doors open, stepping into the cavernous, opulent space. The ballroom is spectacular. Hundreds of round tables covered in white silk and expensive floral centerpieces fill the room. The elite donors of Atlanta are eating catered meals and staring up at the massive stage erected at the front of the hall. Flanking the stage are 3 gigantic high-definition LED screens displaying a heavily edited, heartbreaking photograph of my late husband Jamal holding my nephew Jaden. The banner above the stage reads the Jaden Legacy Fund in elegant gold script. Standing in the center of the stage, bathed in a bright white spotlight, are Chantel and Trent. Chantel is holding a microphone, wearing a modest black dress, acting the part of the reluctant, grieving mother. Trent is standing just behind her, looking down at his expensive shoes, playing the role of the solemn, supportive husband. My sister Aisha chose her hoarded wealth over her own flesh and blood. Chantel speaks into the microphone, her voice echoing perfectly through the high-end venue sound system. She left this innocent baby with absolutely nothing. She turned her back on her husband's final dying wish, because her heart has been hardened by corporate greed. But tonight, I know this church family will step up and provide the love and security that my sister so ruthlessly denied him. The crowd murmurs in deep sympathy. A few wealthy parishioners dab their eyes with napkins, moved by the fabricated tragedy of the golden child. I stop walking right in the center aisle of the ballroom, standing directly under a massive crystal chandelier. My blood-red suit commands the attention of the tables nearby, but Chantel is too busy acting out her fraudulent grief to notice me standing in the crowd. I reach into the pocket of my blazer. My fingers wrap tightly around the small plastic remote trigger Malik handed me outside the venue. I look up at my sister basking in the spotlight, preparing to ask the congregation to open their checkbooks and fund her criminal extortion scam. As Chantel takes a dramatic, shaky breath and opens her mouth to ask for the first multi-million-dollar donation, I press the button. The massive LED screens behind the stage emit a loud, screeching electronic glitch that tears through the ballroom speakers, causing the entire audience to jump in their seats. The soft, romantic ambient lighting of the ballroom abruptly dies. The gigantic screens flash violently with a blinding static distortion before plunging into absolute terrifying darkness. The massive screens behind the stage emit a loud, screeching electronic glitch that tears through the ballroom speakers, causing the entire audience to jump in their seats. The soft, romantic ambient lighting of the ballroom abruptly dies. The gigantic screens flash violently with a blinding static distortion before plunging into absolute terrifying darkness. The silence in the grand venue is deafening. Then the digital projectors roar back to life, illuminating the dark ballroom with glaring red graphics. My financial surveillance software does not produce confusing spreadsheets. It creates undeniable visual maps. A massive digital ledger scrolls down the center screen, highlighting a direct trail of wire transfers from Trent's failing craft brewery to a blacklisted Costa Rican server. The total figure flashes in bold white numbers across the displays. $2.5 million. The congregation stares in absolute bewilderment. A prominent city councilman sitting at the front table drops his fork. Whispers ripple through the hundreds of wealthy donors as they try to comprehend the sudden shift in programming. Trent turns around to look at the screens and his entire body goes rigid. The fake pious expression he wore just seconds ago crumbles into raw panic. He steps back, bumping into the microphone stand. I keep walking down the center aisle, my red suit commanding the space as the chaotic murmurs grow louder. I do not raise my voice, but I speak with absolute clarity. You are not looking at a legacy fund, I announce, and the acoustics of the ballroom carry my voice perfectly over the growing uproar. You are looking at an offshore gambling debt. The man standing on this stage asking for your charity owes $2.5 million to a violent sports betting syndicate. The ballroom erupts. Church deacons stand up from their tables pointing at the screens. Chantel drops her microphone and rushes to Trent, grabbing his arm. She looks up at the towering financial data, her face twisting in horror as she realizes I did not just find the debt, I exposed it to the exact people they were trying to scam. Cut the feed, Bishop. Calvin roars from the side of the room. He is sprinting toward the production booth, his tuxedo jacket flapping behind him. Turn those screens off right now. But my team is firmly in control. Malik taps his earpiece and the display shifts immediately to the next piece of evidence. The financial ledgers vanish, replaced by crisp, high-definition security footage from my gated estate. The video plays in full color, accompanied by crystal-clear audio, echoing through the mega-church sound system. The congregation watches in stunned silence as the screens show Trent sneaking up my driveway in the dead of night. They see the heavy steel crowbar clutched in his hand. They see the dark canvas duffel bag slung across his shoulder. Then the audio kicks in, Trent's voice angry and unhinged blasts through the venue speakers. You are going to lose everything, Aisha, he snarls on the recording, struggling against my security guards. You might as well just surrender the $4 million now and save yourself the public humiliation. The contrast is absolutely devastating. The congregation just spent the last 20 minutes listening to Chantel and Trent portray themselves as humble, heartbroken victims seeking justice for a fatherless child. Now they are watching high-resolution proof of Trent attempting an armed burglary at the home of a grieving widow to extort millions of dollars. I see First Lady Denise clutching the edge of a banquet table, her diamond necklace sparkling as she breathes in heavy, panicked gasps. She spent her entire life curating the perfect family image, sacrificing my well-being to protect Chantel's flawless reputation. Now she has to watch her golden child's husband exposed as a violent, desperate criminal in front of the wealthiest donors in Atlanta. Stop looking at that! Chantel screams, her voice cracking with hysteria. She runs to the edge of the stage, waving her arms frantically at the audience. It is a lie. My sister is a hacker. She fabricated that video to ruin us. Do not look at it. The congregation is not listening to her. They are watching the screen as the footage clearly shows Trent throwing a vicious punch at my security detail before being dragged away. The reality of the extortion plot is undeniable. Several prominent donors are already standing up from their tables, reaching for their coats and signaling their spouses to leave. They know a federal investigation when they see one, and they want absolutely no part of a charity fraud scandal. Calvin reaches the sound booth and begins banging furiously on the glass door, but it is locked from the inside. My tech operatives have physically barricaded themselves in the control room, ensuring the broadcast continues uninterrupted. Get her out of here, Calvin bellows, turning his wrath toward me. He points a shaking finger at me from across the room. Ushers, remove that woman from my church. 6 burly men in matching suits step out from the perimeter of the ballroom, moving quickly toward the center aisle. They are the church security detail men, conditioned to follow the bishop's every command without question. But they do not make it within 10 feet of me. Malik and my private protection detail instantly form a defensive perimeter around me. My guards are not volunteer church ushers. They are elite former military contractors who do not flinch at intimidation. Malik steps forward, sliding his suit jacket back just enough to reveal the tactical holster at his waist. The church ushers stop dead in their tracks, exchanging nervous glances before slowly backing away. Nobody is willing to risk a physical altercation with my team. I continue my slow, deliberate walk down the center aisle until I am standing just a few feet away from the edge of the stage. Trent is completely paralyzed, staring blankly at the security footage playing on a loop above his head. His entire fraudulent life is crumbling in real time, and he knows there is no escape. Chantel falls to her knees on the stage, weeping uncontrollably. This is not her manufactured television crying. These are real, desperate tears of a woman who realizes her web of lies has finally caught her. She looks down at me, her makeup running in dark streaks down her face. "Cut the power," Chantel shrieks, her voice raw and hoarse. "Somebody pull the main breaker, turn it off." The lights in the ballroom flicker as someone in the back tries to manually override the system, but Malik's team anticipated that move. The backup generators kick in instantly, keeping the massive LED screens blazing bright with the evidence of their crimes. I step up to the polished silver microphone stand situated at the front of the center aisle. It was placed there for wealthy donors to announce their pledges, but tonight, it will serve a very different purpose. I adjust the microphone, ensuring it is perfectly angled to capture my voice. The chaos in the ballroom begins to quiet down. The shouting, the murmurs, the frantic footsteps all fade away as hundreds of people turn their attention back to me. They can sense that the execution is not over. They can feel the heavy atmospheric shift, signaling the final blow. I reach into the inside pocket of my blood-red blazer. I pull out a single pristine manila envelope, holding it up so the entire room can see it clearly under the venue spotlights. Chantel stops crying. She stares at the envelope and her eyes widen with a new, entirely different kind of terror. She recognizes the laboratory seal on the flap. She thinks I am holding the fake DNA test she bought from the corrupt technician. She thinks I am just going to expose her bribery. She has absolutely no idea how deep I actually dug. I tap the microphone. The high-pitched whine cuts through the remaining whispers in the massive ballroom. Chantel is staring at the manila envelope in my hand. Her eyes are wide with panic because she thinks she knows what is inside. She thinks I am holding the fake document she bought from Tyrone, the corrupt lab technician. She thinks I am just going to expose her bribery. She is completely wrong. I speak clearly into the microphone, making sure my voice echoes into every corner of the grand venue. "Yesterday morning, my sister went on live television to show you a piece of paper she claimed was a DNA test. What she did not tell you is that she paid a laboratory technician $10,000 to print a fake result. But she made one massive, arrogant mistake. She provided a real genetic swab from her baby for the baseline. I did not bother with her bribe technician. I took the raw genetic data from her son and ran a blind familial cross-match through a global ancestry database. I signal Malik. The screens behind the stage shift again. The security footage of Trent vanishes. In its place, a certified genetic profile report appears in glowing white text against a dark background. The massive letters confirm a 99.9% paternal match. But the photograph next to the match does not belong to my late husband Jamal. It does not belong to Trent either. I raise my hand and point directly at the front table. The photograph on the screen belongs to Julian Sparks. The entire ballroom gasps. All eyes pivot to the front row, where the beloved married youth pastor is sitting right next to his heavily pregnant wife. Julian turns the color of chalk. His wife drops her crystal water glass, and it shatters violently against the marble floor. My flawless golden child sister did not just cheat on her husband, I announce the truth, dropping like a hammer. She slept with the married youth pastor who has been preaching moral purity to your teenagers every Sunday. She tried to pin her illegitimate baby on my dead husband to steal my estate and hide her absolute hypocrisy. The sanctuary erupts into total unmitigated chaos. Shouts of anger and disbelief echo across the tables. Wealthy donors are standing up, pointing at the stage and demanding answers. But I am not finished. I turn my attention to my father, Bishop Calvin, who is frozen in horror at the side of the room. "You wanted to preach a televised sermon about greed, Calvin," I say, my voice slicing through the heavy noise. "Let us talk about your church accounts. You allowed Trent to manage the Charity Expansion Fund. You gave him unrestricted access to the donations of these hardworking people." I pull up the final financial routing map on the screens. It shows direct red lines connecting the church tax-exempt accounts to the violent underground sports betting syndicate. Trent did not just owe $2.5 million, I continue. He was actively using your holy megachurch to launder money for an international criminal enterprise. And your trusted Deacon Wallace signed off on every single fraudulent transfer to keep the books clean. You turned this church into a laundromat for violent criminals, and you tried to extort a grieving widow to cover up your massive federal crimes. Bishop Calvin loses the last shred of his pastoral restraint. The holy facade he wore for 40 years completely shatters. His face contorts with pure unhinged rage. He lets out a guttural scream and lunges toward the center aisle, his fists clenched ready to physically strike his own daughter to silence the truth. My security team steps forward instantly, forming a wall of solid muscle, but they do not even have to touch him. Before my father can take 3 steps, the heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom violently burst open. A dozen federal agents in heavy tactical gear swarm into the venue. The flashing red and blue lights of police cruisers illuminate the glass lobby behind them, casting an eerie glow over the panicked congregation. Federal Bureau of Investigation, the lead agent shouts over a megaphone. Nobody move. The agents bypass the confused wealthy donors and move straight toward the stage. They tackle Trent to the ground right next to the microphone stand, slapping heavy steel handcuffs onto his wrists. Trent is sobbing, begging for a lawyer as they haul him to his feet. 2 more agents intercept Deacon Wallace near the exit, pinning him against the wall. And the lead agent walks directly up to Bishop Calvin, grabbing his arms and detaining him for federal financial fraud and money laundering. I stand perfectly still in my blood-red suit, watching the empire of lies collapse under the weight of federal indictments. Chantel is left alone on the stage, screaming as they drag her husband away. The execution is complete. The next morning, the federal probate courthouse is eerily quiet compared to the chaos of the gala. I walk into the courtroom with Miss Covington by my side. The atmosphere is completely different today. There are no church elders to protect my family. There are no television cameras to manipulate. There is only the cold, hard reality of the justice system. Chantel is sitting at the petitioner's table completely alone. Trent is currently sitting in a federal holding cell, unable to make bail. Deacon Wallace has already been stripped of his law license and is cooperating with the authorities to save himself from a lengthy prison sentence. My sister looks haggard. The designer clothes and perfect makeup are gone, replaced by dark circles and the frantic trembling of a woman who knows she has lost everything. When the judge calls the session to order, Ms. Covington does not even give Chantel's newly appointed public defender a chance to speak. Covington steps up to the podium and delivers an absolute massacre. She presents the sworn confession from the lab technician, the certified medical records of Jamal's vasectomy, the original corporate blind trust documents for my estate, and the undeniable proof that the will Chantel submitted is a blatant amateur forgery. But Covington does not stop there. She hands the judge a heavy binder containing our countersuit for civil fraud, emotional distress, and defamation. The judge is absolutely furious. He looks down at Chantel with pure judicial disgust. He strikes his gavel, dismissing her fraudulent probate claim with extreme prejudice. He then signs an immediate order compelling Chantel to pay every single cent of my exorbitant legal fees, bankrupting whatever small savings she has left. The legal execution takes less than 20 minutes. I do not even look at my sister as I walk out of the courtroom. Her sobbing echoes off the wooden benches, but I feel absolutely nothing for her. The dominoes continue to fall over the next 48 hours. The Internal Revenue Service and the Federal Bureau of Investigation completely freeze the megachurch operational assets pending a massive laundering investigation. Without the church funds to shield them, my parents lose everything. The bank forecloses on their $10 million mansion. The luxury cars are repossessed by the dealership. Their wealthy congregation scatters, abandoning them the moment the federal subpoenas start arriving. The social standing my mother prioritized over her own daughter's well-being evaporates into thin air, leaving her with nothing but the reality of her own toxic choices. Exactly 1 week after the gala, I am sitting in my home office reviewing my highly profitable quarterly technology earnings when my head of security alerts me over the intercom. He tells me my mother is standing at the front gates of my estate. I tell him to leave the gates closed, but I stand up from my desk and walk out to the edge of the property to face her one last time. Denise is standing on the other side of the heavy iron bars. She looks utterly broken. She is wearing a wrinkled trench coat, clutching a cheap handbag. Aisha, she begs, her voice cracking with pure desperation. You have to help us. Your father is facing federal prison. The lawyers will not even take our calls without a massive retainer. Trent is threatening to testify against Calvin to get a lighter sentence. We have nowhere to go. Please, you have billions of dollars. Just give us a loan to keep us off the streets. We are your family. I stand on my side of the iron gate, looking at the woman who slapped me, who isolated me, who allowed my sister to drag my dead husband's name through the mud just to protect a fraud. I reach into the pocket of my blazer and pull out a crisp $50 bill. I slide the bill through the narrow gap in the iron bars, allowing it to flutter to the concrete at her feet. Here I say, my voice completely devoid of any sympathy. This is exactly what you gave me when I was 19 years old and called you begging for help because I could not afford my college textbooks and was starving in my dorm room. You told me to figure it out because you needed the rest of your money to buy Chantel a new car. Consider your debt paid. I turn my back on her before she can even formulate a response. I ignore her wailing as I walk up the long, sweeping driveway of the estate I built with my own hands. I walk through the heavy mahogany doors and listen to the satisfying sound of the electronic deadbolts locking into place. I return to my sunlit home office and walk over to the small crystal decanter on my credenza. I pour myself a generous glass of expensive bourbon. I take a slow, warm sip, feeling the familiar burn in my chest, and look at the framed photograph of Jamal sitting on my desk. His kind eyes and warm smile look back at me, reminding me of the beautiful life we shared. I protected his honorable name. I protected the empire we envisioned together. And most importantly, I finally protected my own peace. I take another sip of the bourbon as the afternoon sun bathes my office in a brilliant golden light. The war is over and I am finally free. The greatest lesson I learned is that sharing DNA does not automatically make someone family. Sometimes the very people who should protect you are the ones who bleed you dry. True security never comes from seeking validation from a toxic ecosystem committed to misunderstanding your worth. It comes from building your own empire in silence and standing firmly in your truth. Your absolute value is never defined by their inability to see it. You owe zero loyalty to manipulation. Have you ever had to cut off toxic relatives to protect your peace? Share your story below and subscribe for more.